But now to a story published in the New York Times today, which claims that Israeli officials obtained Hamas's battle plan for the October 7 terror attacks over a year before they were carried out, according to documents, emails and interviews revealed by Times journalists. I'll note the Times reports that although Israel officials knew of the Hamas plans, it says they dismissed them as impossible. And as reported earlier, that ceasefire well and truly over. It is now back to war fighting. Conflict, of course, resuming there between Israel and Gaza and Hamas. Joining me now to get the latest, senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Malcolm Davis. Malcolm, thank you for your time. Let's start with those revelations in the Times today. What's your response?
Look, mistakes are often made in terms of intelligence assessment. You just need to look at 9/11, where sort of we should have seen the warning signs there and we didn't. And I think this is a similar sort of situation where clearly intelligence indicators and warnings were picked up, were assessed, and then put up the line to the senior leaders, and they were dismissed for whatever reason. The assumption being, I think, on this occasion was that Hamas didn't have the military capability to do such a massive attack, and that was wrong. And I think that it just goes to show that the intelligence business is a tricky one in terms of ensuring that not only do you get the assessment correct, but you then have a way to get political leaders to listen when they do need to listen. And sometimes it just doesn't work.
You're so right to pick up that point about the listening. I'd also say too, I think Israel was hampered. It withdrew from Gaza about a decade ago, so it lacks that human intelligence component. It's not all just technological surveillance. It's not all just picking up emails, isn't it? I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that's been missed a little bit around the world as we've got more and more technology and cyber surveillance. We've perhaps defunded or underfunded the human involvement of the spy network, and that's critically important as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, spying is the world's second oldest profession for a good reason, because essentially it's so effective if it can be done well. The ability to essentially be able to gather sort of a collection of informants that will pass you the right information for you to be on the spot, to be able to gather that information, I think is really crucial. Too often we resort to the technology solution rather than thinking about the human solution.
What about blowback in and around Israel, in the region, or more broadly?
Well, I think it's fair to say that at the end of this war, Netanyahu, I think, will not survive the revelations that they had a year's warning of this attack, and they dismissed it when they should have listened to it. So I think the blowback there is political in terms of Netanyahu's future career, but clearly they're not going to change prime ministers in the middle of a war. But I do think that there will be lessons learned from this, not just for the Israelis, but for all Western militaries in terms of how do we think about intelligence, how do we think about threat assessment. This has implications not just for Israel, but also for the US and its allies in the Indo-Pacific in terms of China. Do we get our assessment right of China? If we don't, then we could potentially pay a cost in lives and capability in some future conflict.
Look, absolutely spot on. When I heard about the terror attacks, the first thing that went through my head is Mossad, this is the Israeli intelligence agency for those at home, one of the best in the game. And if this fails Mossad, I think we're all in trouble around the world, and I hope everyone's doing belts and braces against their own agencies, testing their own agencies, but I think that will be something that will come out of all of this. Just this truth this afternoon, the expiration of that and the resumption of fighting. We haven't got all the hostages out, of course. Do you think we'll ever get another ceasefire in the near term, or are we back to really ramping up the conflict here?
I doubt another ceasefire in the near term. I think that the conflict will go back into full pace. The Israelis know that they have to defeat Hamas decisively. I would go so far as to say that they have to rout them because they cannot allow Hamas to remain in existence in any form that would allow them to launch further attacks on Israel. So I think that the fighting will continue. It will intensify. The challenge, of course, for the Israelis is the further south they push in Gaza, the greater risk of high levels of civilian casualties. And the more casualties there are, the more international pressure there will be on Israel to have another ceasefire. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place in the sense that they can't have an indefinite ceasefire whilst Hamas exists. But if they want to destroy Hamas, they run the risk of civilian casualties and coming under more pressure for a ceasefire.
And I have to say, as regrettable as those civilian casualties are, the world must be rid of Hamas. So it's a Hobson's choice, I think we'll call it. Malcolm Davis, thank you.